What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to basketball. The conversation got started on my Discord probably a couple months ago. They were like, hey, which teams are actually the best at developing NBA talent? And I had my ideas, right, of who's good and who's bad, but I'm like, you know what? Let me actually go and do a study to see which teams are the best at developing their talent. And so what did I do? I built a spreadsheet. I know that's a little bit of a meme on this channel at this point that I build a spreadsheet for everything, but why wouldn't I, right? It's a great way to do an analysis. And so what I've done here is I've collected the data, a lot of it thanks to AI, so shout out AI for getting me some like actual data that I can use, and I went and spot checked it all because AI is not always perfect, and I think it's pretty accurate. If something's incorrect, then something's incorrect. It shouldn't be a huge deal. Most of it seems correct, but I wanted to do an actual study to be like, hey, which teams are the best at developing their draft talent? And so I'm being very specific with how I say this because I've done this study in a very specific way. And now, is this study perfect? By any means, no. But I think it does tell an interesting story, and I think we can learn a lot from it. So let me go and explain it. So I know you guys see a lot of numbers going on here, but let's just talk about the actual study that I've done. The data that I've used is from 2011 to 2021. It gives us a look at some recent players that we're starting to see whether or not they've developed or not, but you don't want to go anything like past that because it's just too soon to tell with talent like that. And I don't want to go any further back than like 2011, at least for now. Maybe I will, just because ownership changes, GMs change, things like this. I feel like 10 years worth of data is a pretty solid sample size. If you guys ever want me to go further back, I certainly can, but I think it's interesting. I should note, this is on draft data right here. All of this is on draft data because what we want to see is we're not just seeing like which team like takes in any given player and turns them into something better than what they were, because there's a lot of different ways you can do that study, but there's a lot of other factors that go into that. What this is looking at is actual drafted NBA players, right? We want to know, if a team drafts a player, what is the likelihood that they become a useful player to them? And how have I determined that? I've determined that by whether or not they get a second contract with the same team that took them. So what does that kind of tell you about this study then, right? And I'm going to stress this. If a success in this is driven by whether or not a drafted player gets a second contract past their rookie contract, right, with the same team that took them. So what does this say, right? So here it is right here again, if you didn't understand that. Again, this study's not perfect, but what it tells us is which teams are the best at developing young talent, but more importantly, like which teams are actually prioritizing it and like using these draft picks, right? So we want to know which of these teams is the best at it. And there's a bunch of different ways to look at this. I know there's a big blank table here. We're going to get into this. There's a lot of detail that can go into these tables, but I've got two tables here that I want you guys to focus on at first. I have a draft only table, and then I have an actually got a chance table. So again, all of this study is done by players that got drafted by a team and that they got a second contract with the team. So this table right here tells us that, the success rate, right? So in this case, the Miami Heat, no surprise whatsoever, are the number one team in the NBA at drafting players and having them succeed, right? They got a second contract. By the way, league average, 23.6% of drafted players get a second contract with the team that drafted them. That's pretty nuts, right? That's nuts in itself. Miami Heat are at the top. Sacramento Kings, only 4.5% of the time within those 10 years did the Kings keep those players, which is nuts, right? But I figured that's not a perfect statistic. We can actually make this statistic a little bit better. So I have the actually got a chance thing here. So there's some times where players or teams draft guys and they store them and it never quite works out, right? So they're not actually getting a chance to like develop them. And we can harp on them for like their draft and everything like that. Like, oh, why did you even take this guy if you couldn't use them? But nonetheless, I want to give the team and its chance to actually develop players a better shot at things. So what I've done here is I've filtered out all the times where teams drafted a player and they never actually suited up for the team at all. And you'll see a couple teams shoot up. The Atlanta Hawks and the San Antonio Spurs shoot up to 1 and 2. Sacramento Kings stay down here. Clippers and Lakers still here at the bottom, along with like Dallas and stuff. Detroit actually falls lower when that happens, which is kind of interesting. But one thing that immediately jumps off the page, and again, I'm going to get into this in a second because I think this is interesting, but the Miami Heat, 44.4% of the time, they draft a player and they get a second contract. When I go and I filter things out, it's the same percentage. And why is that? It's because every single player the Miami Heat have drafted over those 10 years has suited up for the team. And that's significant in and of itself. Like, that gives the Miami Heat all the more reason to be like, hey, we're good at this, right? Like, at least everybody we're taking is suiting up, right? I do think that says something, right? Maybe they just don't waste time on certain draft picks or something like that. But when those percentages can stay the same, I find that to be really interesting, because I don't really see another iteration of that happening on this list anywhere. Maybe I'm missing something. I went and kind of did an eye check through, but the Heat seem to be the only team that had like a 100% we draft you, you will play for us at some point rate. And that's pretty sick. All right, other table I'm going to bring you guys to down here, and then we're going to go get into the more nitty gritty of things up here. But what this table does is it shows us a couple things, right? Right now we have Rookie of the Year being displayed, right? And I guess I can bring this up here, or we can just say like success quantity. Maybe that's a better way of saying it in this case. But right now we have Rookie of the Year. So this is the amount of Rookies of the Year that all these teams have drafted within those 10-year time frame. So we have the Sixers, they got 2 of them. The Timberwolves got 2 of them, right? That'd be Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards. This one, I'm going to assume it's Ben Simmons, and then it's not Embiid, is it? No, because it's not Embiid. He didn't win it that year. Who's the other Sixers Rookie of the Year? Why can't I think of him? I don't know. Oh, you know who it is? It's Michael Carter Williams. That's who it is. I couldn't think of who it was for a second. But so 2 Rookies of the Year here, and then we have the Bucks with 1, the Hornets, Raptors, Grizzlies, Mavericks, Trailblazers. Nobody else has taken a Rookie of the Year in that amount of time. What we can also go and check is All-Stars. Who's been taking All-Stars? The Minnesota Timberwolves have drafted 4 All-Stars in that amount of time. So maybe, even though, well, actually the Timberwolves have a pretty high rate of this as well, it drops a little bit more, or actually the success rate goes up a little bit more. So the Timberwolves pretty good at drafting and keeping their guys, and they're developing the most like all-star level talent. So maybe you say it's the Timberwolves in some capacity, right? Then we have the Sixers up here, the Lakers up here as well, the Jazz, Celtics, Kings, Raptors, yada, yada, yada. The only 2 teams that not draft an all-star in those 10 years, which tells you how many guys actually make the all-star team. It's maybe higher than you think, but the Rockets and Pacers have not drafted someone that's turned into an all-star. Now, here's the thing, right? Not everybody that Minnesota took is like still on the team. Not everybody that like the Lakers took is still on the team. This just tells you they drafted people that good, right? Did they keep them? That's another question. Finally, we can go to all NBA, Sixers, Jazz, Celtics, Kings, Timberwolves, Mavericks. Those are the 6 teams that have developed the most all NBA talent. We have a lot in here. And then obviously you have a bigger group down here in Cleveland, the Hornets, my Chicago Bulls, the Heat. Kind of surprisingly, right? No all-NBA talent. Bam does not fall into that. Houston Rockets, Spurs, Knicks, Nets, Pacers, those teams haven't taken any all-NBA talent. So kind of interesting. But what I want to do now is I want to go from the bottom of the list all the way to the top here. What I can do with this tool is I can pull up any team, and what it's going to do, let's take the Sacramento Kings right here, right? And it's going to pull up all the draft picks that they've had within that 10-year time frame. So we can actually go and take a look at like what's happening with these teams to be like, hey, what's kind of going on? Where are we going wrong? Things like that. And honestly, starting out here, we had 22 players drafted over that 10-year time frame. We had some rough ones for a while there. Thomas Robinson, Ben McLemore, Nick Stauskas was a first-round pick, Willie Cauley-Stein, Scalabissier, right? De'Aaron Fox. Their one like actual success of getting a second contract, and guys that they drafted over those 10 years. And, you know, they're going to have some other ones soon, like Keegan Murray and stuff like that. But all NBA, all-star, that's awesome. The only other guy that really achieved anything otherwise is Tyrese Halliburton, and they traded him, right? So kind of interesting. One guy in that 10-year time frame did the Sacramento Kings keep. Like a lot of these names, not much all. They just traded Davion Mitchell, right? Keita's been actually starting a bit for the Celtics, so that's kind of interesting, right? Marvin Bagley was a number 2 pick that didn't really work out, right? Like Harry Giles didn't really work out. It's a lot of no's on here, right? But let's go up to the Clippers, who aren't a ton better, so we can actually go and take a look at them. Again, you might not even recognize a lot of these guys, but I find it interesting. I'll touch on really quick just like what these little symbols mean, just because I had to implement a little system to help me count things. So star just means a guy that's made an all-star game and an all-NBA. A plus means they made an all-star game. The pound symbol means they never appeared in an NBA game like at all. So that's important to note. Like David, I don't know even who this is. never played for them, but they drafted him, and yeah, he didn't get anything, so that's still kind of a negative on here. If you got the little ampersand here, not the ampersand, the teal day here, you got Rookie of the Year and the dollar sign. They got all the awards, like they got All NBA, All Star, and Rookie of the Year, because there are a couple guys on this that we'll look at that fell into that category. But the Clippers here, also only one guy to get a second contract, and it's Terrence Mann. Unfortunately, they missed out on an All-NBA and All-Star and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, possibly an MVP down the line, right? I mean, dude's phenomenal, but these names are rough. Like, none of these guys really became anything all that interesting. Reggie Bullock stuck around the NBA for a while, right? But like, all these guys, nowhere in the NBA, nowhere really for these guys, and nowhere here either. It's just that might be an uglier list than the Kings, honestly. Clippers, not looking that good. Not looking that good. Let's go to the Lakers. Taking a look at the Lakers, right? It has been a while since they've kept somebody, right? But what's interesting here is they've got a little bit more green in here, as we kind of indicated down with this other table at one point. We've got Julius Randle, who's made All-NBA, but they didn't keep him past his first contract, right? Jordan Clarkson technically got a second contract with the team. Ended up moving him later on anyway, but Robert Sacre, only other guy. If y'all remember him, big bald dude, number 50 was what the number he always wore. Wasn't much of anything, but is what it is. Brandon Ingram obviously made an all-star team. D'Angelo Russell is a pretty good player. So you've missed out on some people, but otherwise, like, some other interesting names on this list, right? Larry Nance Jr., good basketball player. Zubats, really good player. Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, Josh Hart, Thomas Bryant still in the league. Mo Wagner. Isak Bonga's not in the league anymore. Taylor Horton Tucker's still in the league. So is Svi Mikhailuk. So, like, they've at least drafted, like, some names, but they haven't kept anybody. So what does that tell you? The Lakers don't care about developing talent. And that's why this study isn't necessarily perfect, because look, some teams are trying to compete and stuff, right? But this does tell us something, though, that they don't care about developing this young talent, because look, if they would have kept some of these guys, maybe something good would have happened with D'Lo, Randall, Larry Nance, Brandon Ingram, right? You had 3 all-stars on the team, like, at one point, and you didn't wait for them to develop, and that's kind of the price of it, right? And maybe you say, like, well, they won a championship within this time frame, so it's not that big of a deal, and maybe that's fair. But at the very least, this isn't a place where young players go to develop, man. It just isn't. Moving on to the Dallas Mavericks, only 2 people, but one of the few people here that's such an absolute success that it might make everything else irrelevant. We have a lot of nothing for a while here. Shout out Jay Crowder, was kind of interesting. Otherwise, that's a bit it. Then we had Luka, right? Obviously, Dennis Smith I thought was going to be much better, but Luka obviously achieved just about everything with the team. Jalen Brunson, who they took at like around the same time, made a lot happen. They didn't end up giving him the contract that he wanted, and he left, which is really unfortunate. That could have been a really good one for them. Then a whole lot of kind of nothing after that. Josh Green did end up getting a second contract, but they've since moved on from him as well. He was a nice player for them on the kind of their championship level run last year, but man, not much for Dallas either. Not much for Dallas either. Let's go on to the Detroit Pistons, who obviously have not done such a great job of developing talent as of late. Maybe it's going to look a little bit better soon, but what do we have here? We have Andre Drummond here. Yep, he ended up having some pretty solid times for them. They didn't accomplish much with him. Then we see Chris Middleton here, made an all-star team. They traded him early on. That hurts. But we actually see some other familiar names on this list. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope didn't get a second contract on the team. He's won a couple championships, right? Spencer Dinwiddie was actually, like, I feel like a lot of people knew he was pretty good on Detroit. Didn't end up going anywhere, and that's kind of interesting. Henry Ellenson was a wasted first-round pick. So was Stanley Johnson. Luke Kennard did get a second contract with the team, but they've since moved on for him. Bruce Brown was a guy they didn't hold on to, and he became a championship-level player for a good team. Killian Hayes, one of the not as good draft picks we've seen recently, but we've had a little bit more success as of late with, like, Isaiah Stewart, who's having a good year. Obviously, Cade Cunningham looks really, really good. Hopefully, Ivy's going to be something, and like Duran and Asar. So hopefully those guys will be around for the long run, but not that great otherwise. Sadiq Bey was the guy that they moved. Luka Garza has been solid for the Timberwolves in spot minutes, so kind of interesting there. Now we go on to the New York Knicks here. A whole lot of nothing for a while there. They were not good at drafting. Now, they didn't have great draft picks at these times. One of them, Kristaps Porzingis, they traded very early on in his promising career, right? That didn't work out. But then we had picks like Jerian Graham, Billy Hernan Gomez, Ntilikina didn't work out. Kevin Knox didn't work out. Mitchell Robinson and RJ Barrett, they've gotten second contracts, but they've since traded RJ Barrett, right? But then we had a couple other names come up as of late. So the draft might be going well since they've kind of made that GM swap, right? Now all of a sudden, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickley, Q Grimes, Miles McBride, Jericho Sims still on the team. I know Knicks fans aren't the biggest fan of him, but nonetheless, One all-star taken in this time. Not a great look. You haven't gotten a bunch of talent, but you've had some pretty high picks as of late. But at least the quality of picks from like this first half to like the second half, more recognizable names at the very least. So maybe we're at least going in a slightly better direction than what we were. Let's go on to the Philadelphia 76ers, who have the most names out of anybody in this time, because obviously the process took place during this, right? So there's a little bit more going on. You had guys like Nerlens Noel, Michael Carter-Williams did win Rookie of the Year. Didn't get a second contract with the team, though, which crazy draft year that was. This feels kind of like a similar year in this. They might have another Rookie of the Year, though, in Jared McCain this year. I guess we'll see. Joel Embiid, he didn't win Rookie of the Year. Malcolm Brogdon won that one, but obviously very, very good draft pick here. We go into like KJ McDaniels did a little bit for them. They didn't hold on to Jeremy Grant, right? I always thought Jordan McRae was going to be something. Jahlil Okafor wasn't a very good pick for them. You go on down. Ben Simmons, obviously he achieved it all, right? Rookie of the Year, all-star, all-NBA. No matter what you say, Ben Simmons was elite, man. He was really, really good. Fell off, not on the team anymore. Luau Cabarro didn't turn anything. Korkmaz did get a second deal, but he didn't want to be there at all. Markelle Fultz, one of the bigger what ifs, right? Didn't work out for them at the end of the day. Zaire Smith, first round pick that almost like never played for them. Let a couple other guys go. Matisse Thybulle, Shake Milton, Landry Shamet, good players. Tyrese Maxey, looking good for them now, though, right? Theo Maledon didn't become much. They let go of Isaiah Joe probably too early. They kept Paul Reed, and then after that, it's kind of a bunch of bleh. But at least with this, like, we got some high-level, like, talent coming through at points, right? Like, you did get a couple of all-stars, more Rookie of the Years. This is a team that's drafted a few more, like, accolade-worthy players in that time, but they've also had a lot higher draft picks, so maybe we should still scrutinize them. Moving on to the Milwaukee Bucks here. Here we go. Not a huge list. Shout out John Henson. He ended up getting a second contract with the team. Then they took Giannis, right, who he didn't win Rookie of the Year, but he's won just about everything since then, right? We had Jabari Parker was a huge miss for them. Rashad Vaughn didn't become anything. Thon Maker didn't. They drafted Malcolm Brogdon. He got Rookie of the Year, and then they moved him, right? And obviously they ended up winning a championship and everything, and that was a whole thing, so maybe it's whatever, but a whole lot of no's for a while there, and maybe that's part of competing, right? Maybe that's part of it, but hard to say. Dante DiVincenzo has ended up becoming a pretty good player. Didn't end up getting a second contract with them, but otherwise, it's a whole lot. There's not much going on in this list, y'all. Like, I still can't figure out why Jabari Parker wasn't good outside of effort alone, but nonetheless, you hit with one really big pick. Not much else you've done as the Milwaukee Bucks in terms of developing young talent. And if I were to project this out a couple of years, I bet you that's all no's past that as well. It's not looking all the greatest right now for the Milwaukee Bucks, but let's move on to the Pacers. One of the few teams with no accolades that they've drafted. They have not been very good at drafting, per se, in terms of finding top-end talent. Solomon Hill, do you feel great about that one being a second contract? Probably not, right? Miles Turner, been a nice long-term starter for you. A whole lot of nothing. Edmund Summer got a second contract. He was a second-round pick. And then a whole lot of nothing again. Isaiah Jackson, he might get a second contract out of him, but like, this team's towards the bottom, right? This team's towards the bottom in terms of actually drafting people, but the team itself is consistently winning games, so maybe there's something to say for that. But I just think it's interesting to point out that the Pacers, not that good at actually drafting people. So kind of interesting to look at. Let's take a look at the Jazz. Jazz have had a few more picks than that, right? And they've actually had some accolades with things. So they obviously had Rudy Gobert, very good draft pick. He was a second round pick, ended up working out. Was he a second round pick or was he a first round pick? He was a first round pick. No, he was just a late first round pick, I believe. Dante Exum did get a second contract with them. So did Rodney Hood. They both weren't that great though. So if you were to take those out, like, because this is kind of a rebuilding time for them, the percentage probably drops a lot lower. So the Jazz maybe should be lower on this list, right? Trey Lyles, he's been solid, and then you had a bunch of bleh. You took Donovan Mitchell, that was a great success. He's not even on the team anymore, and it's been a whole lot of bleh ever since. Like, Grayson Allen's solid, but you moved him, right? So Utah Jazz, not that great at developing young talent, and you look at the young talent that's on the team right now. Keontae George looks promising, and then like Walker Kessler's looking okay at times. The rookies they took this year are struggling early, but you know, is what it is. Utah Jazz, also pretty low on this, and yes, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. We're going from the bottom up. Now let's do the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I'm sure you guys are probably like, oh, that's interesting. They're actually pretty low on the list for how we think about the Oklahoma City Thunder. Well, take a look at this. It was pretty good towards the beginning of this study, right? You had the Steven Adams, Andre Robertson, Alex Abrines stuck around for a little bit. A lot of people thought Perry Jones was going to be something. And then you had a whole lot of nothing for a while there until you drafted Domas Sabonis, who has become an all-NBA all-star player, but you moved him. You didn't wait for him to develop. And then a whole lot of nothing again. You got Josh Giddey, solid NBA player. You've moved on from him. Trey Mann, you didn't hold on to. You sent him over to Charlotte. He's starting to look good now. Robinson Earl, Aaron Wiggins is looking like an early success, but for a while there, this team not doing much with these young players, like not accomplishing a whole ton or just not waiting for them to develop in these two guys right here. So kind of interesting out of the Thunder. Let's go on to the Nets. Nets have had some interesting picks over the years, to say the least. We have a whole lot of just like, I wish the Bulls would have taken Mason Plumlee that year in the draft. I was really bummed about that. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, did he deserve a second contract? Maybe not. A whole lot of nothing. You had Karis LeVert and Jared Allen during that little stretch, right? You had, those were two good draft picks. Jared Allen was the only guy that ended up doing anything accolade worthy out of people that they've drafted. They gave up on him, which is unfortunate. They moved him after he got his second contract, and then you got a whole lot of nothing here. You've taken Nick Claxton. He's been solid, and then it's been a whole lot of nothing again. Obviously, Cam Thomas is getting buckets and everything. He technically hasn't gotten a second contract yet, so we'll see what happens with that, but nonetheless, like, not that great for the Nets either, right? You had some talent. You haven't done a great job of holding on to it, but even like a lot of these, bad draft. And I think it's important to remember, right? Again, how many, like, what is the percentage? And this might be the most interesting part of the whole study, right? Only 23% of the time does a player that gets drafted stay with their team past that. This is for all you guys to remember when you guys get into the draft season and we all get really excited, right? Because we go, oh, all these new players are coming in. I like all the new players. They're all shiny new things. And I try to tell you guys, I'm like, look, most of this isn't going to work, right? It's so hard to make it in the NBA. There's only so many spots when we're all saying like, oh, like all the people in this most recent draft, like the Reed Shepherds, Zach Edey's, and all these guys are going to be so great. Only 23% of the time do these guys actually stick around. That's it. That's how often these teams see them as valuable and keep them. Now, some of them, mismanagement, right? Maybe not in this case. There's not really anybody that they didn't give a contract to that they should have. But again, we can go back to like the Thunder, right? And Domas Sabonis, that's a mismanagement. Otherwise, it's just a lot of bad draft picks. At one point, Mitch McGary, people thought he was going to be good. A lot of people thought Josh Hustis was going to be an interesting player. People loved Cameron Payne when he first came into the NBA, when he was bright and new, and now he's kind of bleh, right? Terrence Ferguson was on everybody's highlight reels. It's important to remember how likely it is that these guys actually work out. All right, on to the Rockets here. No accolades for this team either. Not drafting at a very high level. Jeremy Lamb, no. Terrence Jones is one of the guys that got a second contract, and he wasn't all that special. Clint Capella, nice basketball player, and then we have a whole lot of bleh. D'Anthony Melton's still in the NBA. Hartenstein, obviously, he's become a nice player, but they didn't hold on to him right. Jalen Green does have a second contract, so does Şengün now, but no actual accolades to look at as of this point. Şengün might make an all-star team at some point, but for the time being, this is what you got. There's a lot of other young guys that we're hoping are going to be a lot of green yeses going forward. The Tari Easons, Amen Thompson, right? Trying to think of other guys that maybe Jabari Smith. I don't know. He's kind of feeling like he won't, honestly, but hopefully some more green for them going forward. Let's go to the Golden State Warriors. This one I found interesting because we've been talking a lot in the Discord. By the way, link in the description. Go join the Discord if you haven't. We've all said, like, the Warriors as of late with the Kumingas, the Moody's, and things like that, who you see on this list, not getting contract extensions right now, but they feel like they've been failing their talent as of late, right? Because they had the Wiseman, Kuminga, Moody. They're not getting any better on this team. So I was very curious to see how this was. And for a little bit there, they were on a little bit of a hot streak, right? Harrison Barnes, nice player. Festus Ezeli, they took Draymond Green, turned him into a nice player, right? They took a Kevon Looney that worked out. Then it got kind of cold for a while there, right? And obviously they were good, that you don't have great draft picks. It's harder to make those work, right? Like Patrick McCaw, Jordan Bell, interesting. Jordan Poole, obviously you didn't hold on to. So that says something. He probably should have kept him, right? I mean, apparently you couldn't make it work, but nonetheless, it didn't happen. Again, James Wiseman, Kuminga, Moody, these guys are turning into something that you want to keep around long term, and I think that's kind of interesting here. And this trend, I'm gonna have to presume, is kind of gonna keep going. Maybe they really love pods, so maybe they keep pods around, but Golden State, not all that great. All right, by the way, league average for this one, 26, so we're still not above kind of the break yet. Let's go to the Washington Wizards, who, in my head, this was the worst team to go to in terms of developing talent and everything. So I find this interesting to look at. Bradley Beal, first one on the list, great for them, right? They took Satoransky, didn't keep him around. Otto Porter, He got a second contract. They definitely overpaid for him in that contract, but didn't hold on to him long after that. They've had some interesting names post then. Kelly Oubre, Rui Hachimura, Denny, who could have made this list, but they traded him during the offseason, right? So he technically got the contract and then just never played past it. So that was kind of a weird one that I had a bit of a discrepancy on with the AI. And so I just said, no, it doesn't count. He didn't really play into the contract. So they had a couple interesting players in that time. They just didn't maintain them. Corey Kispert did get his extension. So there you go. But there's not a lot gonna probably be after this, y'all. So this percentage might be dropping as well. Let's go to the Suns, who have a pretty identical one. Just taking a look at this, Devin Booker, obviously a great success for them in this one. TJ Warren was a guy they maintained. He was solid for a while. Alex Len just kind of stuck on this team for a while. I wouldn't necessarily call that a great success. DeAndre Ayton and Bridges both got new contracts with them, but they weren't maintained long term. So that's something to say. You look at some of the other guys taken here. Is there anybody all that interesting? Like Bogdan Bogdanovic technically never like suited up for them, I don't believe, but obviously he was in the NBA. Dragon Bender, really bad pick. Marquise Chris didn't turn in anything. Tyler Ulis, Josh Jackson. A lot of people thought like these kind of players were going to be something. Not really. Cam Johnson, they didn't maintain past that. Jalen Smith was a guy they gave up on really quickly. So kind of interesting there. But again, at least you're starting to see a little bit more consistency with a team like this. Now we're going into the Charlotte Hornets, who are at league average. This is the median of teams, right? But it's a little bit deceiving. You look at this team here, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist got a second contract. He was not that good. Cody Zeller got a second contract. He wasn't bad. He wasn't that good either, though. And then we had a dark age for a little bit there. We had Noah Vonleh, didn't work out for them. PJ Hairston, didn't he get arrested? I think so. They didn't keep Dwight Powell. Frank Kaminsky didn't work. Malik Monk was bad until they traded him, and then he found out he was good at basketball. Miles Bridges, he technically got a second contract with the team. Why is this one there? I got to change it. See, AI even makes mistakes sometimes. So Miles Bridges did end up getting a second one. Does this shoot up the Hornets? It does shoot the Hornets up a little bit. So they're now at 30.4. So good for them. That ended up working out a little bit more for them. PJ Washington got a second contract, but he really blew up more off the team. Cody Martin's still on the team. LaMelo Ball, great success for them. Might fill in this other one soon. Nick Richards has been a nice one for them. But then, as of late, it's kind of fallen off again with some of these. And a lot of these guys, unfortunately, were like arrested and things like that. So we're hoping things are better now. We're hoping that it's going to be better, but for a while there, it was a little bit scary. Let's move on to the Cleveland Cavaliers, because this one, not that great. Not that great to look at, in all honesty. Dion Waiters, Tyler Zeller, Anthony Bennett, one of the worst ones ever, right? It was rough there for a while. Joe Harris, they didn't hold on to. Chetty Osman, solid player for them. They needed cheap guys to make out the contract. They didn't hold on to Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, huge success for them, right? Kevin Porter and Dylan Windler, not much for them there. But as of late, you probably feel a little bit better about things, right? Just with like the Okoro, the Evan Mobley, right? They've put a lot of other talent on the team. We'll see what happens with like Jalen Tyson, but he doesn't really get on the court much at all right now. So kind of hard to tell. Not a ton of draft picks though, because a lot of these years, 2011 to 2021, they were in contention and trading their picks all the time. But I think it's still important to look at to be like, hey, how are they really doing with some of these? And they didn't quite hit the mark with them. Man, Kay Felder was fun to watch. If you never watched Kay Felder college highlights, go look him up. We're getting into more championship level teams now with the Denver Nuggets. Denver Nuggets here, 27.3, so just above league average. They didn't hold on to Fournier, right? Joffrey Laverne didn't become anything. They didn't hold on to Nurkic. Gary Harris got a second contract, and they moved him. Jokic, obviously a big success for them. Emmanuel Mudiay, I thought Mudiay was going to be tough. He didn't become anything. Jamal Murray, really good success for them. Probably could have more of these, but obviously championship level player for them. Malik Beasley, they didn't hold on to, not really prioritizing that young talent quite as much. Monte Morris and Michael Porter both got second contracts. Vanderbilt didn't, but there's a lot more like quality names, I feel like, on this list, right? Like the Bulls, Bones Highland, Jared Vanderbilt, right? As of late, it seems like they're doing a better job at picking, I guess, potential talent, even if they're not maintaining them quite as much. I think that's interesting. All right, so the Hornets, they moved up. We go on to the Boston Celtics, who maybe they haven't had as elite of draft picks at all times because they've been in contention. They hit when it mattered. They certainly hit when it mattered. So Jared Sullinger, he got a second contract. He was interesting. Kelly Olynyk, they moved and got more assets for. Marcus Smart, big player for them. Terry Rozier was really good for them. Jaylen Brown, obviously a huge hit. These couple years here, these were kind of the down years, right? They hit on Jaylen Brown big time. Abdel Nader technically got a second contract. Jason Tatum, huge hit for them, right? Robert Williams was a good player for them. Grant Williams never got a second contract, but quality NBA player at the very least. Going on to Peyton Pritchard, he was a big one, but look, a small stint where you got elite draft picks in terms of like where you fell in the lottery. You made it count during that time. That's why the Celtics didn't stay down for very long, right? So good for them. Moving on to my Chicago Bulls, who find themselves higher on the list than I would have thought. At 31.3% of the time they kept him. Not a ton of picks during this stretch, though. Marcus Teague was nothing. Tony Snell probably didn't deserve a second contract. They traded Doug McDermott in a trade for Cameron Payne, and they packaged Taj Gibson with it. And I think we gave him a second. One of the worst trades ever. Bobby Portis, they didn't hold on to. I was really mad when they traded him at the time. Denzel Valentine got a second contract, probably didn't deserve it. Always thought Paul Zipser was going to last longer. Lauri Markkanen, they had no idea the talent that they had on that team. Got rid of him, right? Wendell Carter, they got rid of him. Still like a starter level player in the NBA. Kobe White on the team, though, like Daniel Gafford, nice player. Patrick Williams just got a new contract. Ayo Dosunmu, right? So interesting guys nonetheless. I don't know. It's still not great, though. Like, the one all-star that you've really taken, and you've had some lottery picks in recent years, is Markkanen, and you didn't hold on to him. And I knew that guy was going to be that good. So it hurts. It hurts. Let's move on to the Grizzlies, man. Let's see the Grizzlies. Turn their fates. They've turned their fates. That's the story of the Memphis Grizzlies right here. Tony Wroten, love Tony Wroten, man. He was fun, didn't get a second contract with the team. Look at some of these other guys, the Jordan Adams, Jarnell Stokes, Jarrell Martin, Andrew Harrison, nope. Devontae Davis, nope, not really. Ivan Rabb, not really. But as of late, Grizzlies have been hitting, man, and maybe that says something because two of their rookies are playing better than some of the other rookies right now. So maybe they've made some changes, stuff like that. Young talent doing a little bit better in this organization. Dylan Brooks. Obviously, they had to flip him at a certain point, but good player for them. Jaren Jackson, awesome. Javon Carter was a good pick, just didn't hold on to him. Ja Morant, one of the guys that have done it all, right? Awesome. Brandon Clark, good player. Desmond Bane, good player. Tillman got a second contract. They've moved on from him. Zaire Williams, felt like a good pick. Something just didn't quite work with him. Santi Aldamas technically hasn't gotten a new contract, but he probably will. He's been a nice player for them, and they've had some other good players since then, right? So, Memphis Grizzlies, you guys are doing things right. It's probably why you're doing so well. The New Orleans Pelicans, 1/3 of the time, it works out for them. That feels like a pretty good percentage, all said and done. So let's take a look at the Pelicans. Obviously, Anthony Davis was one of them, right? Worked out really, really well for them. He actually didn't win Rookie of the Year because he was so injured in his rookie season. Austin Rivers was like a number 10 pick that didn't work out for them. Buddy Hield, they didn't hold on to, probably should have. Good player nonetheless. Then we have a couple bleh type picks. Zion, obviously really talented player. Jackson Hayes is still in the league. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they didn't really help him like hit his potential necessarily. Then we have Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, who have been two recent successes for them. So their percentage is high. They haven't drafted a ton of people in general, but some of the ones that they have, they've hit okay on. Darius Miller, maybe not as much, so that maybe skews the data a little bit, but they're going to have a couple others probably after this, like with the Jordan Hawkins, like and guys like that. I'd like to assume like Yves Missy is going to work out for them. It just seems like a pretty easy one to develop all said and done, but Pelicans, not too bad, actually. Not too bad. Let's go on to the Orlando Magic, man. The Orlando Magic. Interesting, because they've got a young group that they're developing right now, right? That we're just starting to kind of see towards the tail end of this, right? You're like, okay, they've been cooking as of late with their draft picks. But let's kind of go back. Andrew Nicholson, Kyle O'Quinn, nothing. Victor Oladipo was a nice success for them. Moved on from him later. Aaron Gordon, good player. Had a bit of a blast spell there. I thought Mario Hezonja was going to be better, so I don't blame him for that. Jonathan Isaac, without the injuries, really good. Got a little bit gross there for a while again then, but as of late, Cole Anthony won, Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero is going to fall into that category, right? Anthony Black looks like he's going to be a nice player. Jet Howard looks like he's going to be a nice player, right? We'll see with Tristan da Silva, but looking like the Magic are going to be shooting up this list over the next couple years, and as of late, got to give them credit, man. They've at least been bringing in some decent talent, so good for them. Let's move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Looking at the Timberwolves, a lot of green here. Almost 40% of the time, it's working out for them. Shabazz Muhammad did get a second contract, and then they realized a bunch of weird shit about him, so they moved on from him. Gorgie Dieng, solid player for a little bit. Andrew Wiggins, yes, that's technically their draft pick. Like, he never suited up for Cleveland outside of Summer League, so I'm going to consider that their pick, right? I mean, all his regular season games were as a Timberwolf, so a lot of accolades here. This one, do the Timberwolves have the most accolades? They very well might, right? I know we were kind of looking at that with like this, with like all-star talent and stuff. Minnesota Timberwolves, yeah, they've like drafted at least the most like all-star level guys, along with some rookie of the year, some all-NBA talent. So pretty good overall. But yeah, Andrew Wiggins, Zach LaVine, they didn't hold on to, but was a great draft pick, right? Karl-Anthony Towns, done it all. Good for him. Tyus Jones, good player. Chris Dunn is still in the NBA. Josh Okogie, still in the NBA. Justin Patton was a rough one. That one didn't work out. Jared Culver, bad draft pick. So there's a lot of highs and a lot of lows, right? Anthony Edwards, we presume, going to keep doing great things, right? Jaden McDaniels got a second contract for them, right? Who else is going to make this list? Guess we'll see, right? They've got a couple young dudes on the team right now. We hope we'll get a chance to thrive, but for the time being, just don't know. I was surprised to see the Portland Trailblazers this high when I first did it. And then I went, okay, it's not actually all that great. So they had Dame. Dame is included on this. He's done it all, right? Then we have Myers Leonard, is kind of like, eh. And then we have CJ McCollum. That's cool. Alan Crabb, meh. Like Jeff Withey was a pick. Pat Connaughton, who they didn't hold on to him probably long enough, but now he's struggling again. Jake Layman, I thought Jake Layman was going to be better in all fairness. Zach Collins, not a great pick. Caleb Swanigan, not a great pick. Simons has worked out. They didn't hold on to Gary Trent long enough, but otherwise, like, man, this team, look at this. I think it's interesting. Damian Lillard starts this list, and then, like, it's not like this team had a ton of success, like, ever, really. And you didn't find any other green down here. You couldn't find anything else, like another all-star somewhere in there. CJ was a nice player, but after that, like, nothing. Like, Anthony Simons came around late, but, like, guys, there's a lot of years in between there and, like, Simons. And, like, Simons, you know, has his flaws as a player still. It's like, couldn't find anything, man. Anything to go along Damian Lillard. And that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. Let's go on to the Toronto Raptors, making good use out of their picks for the most part. This is a good percentage. 42.9% of the time, the picks work out for them. Terrence Ross, like a boss. Awesome player, right? He was really good for them. He was a lot of fun. Bruno Caboclo, 2 years away from being 2 years away, and he's about 6 years removed from that, so hasn't really worked out for him. DeLon Wright got a second contract with them. He was a solid player for them. Norm Powell, killing it in the NBA. He's a guy that they actually developed, put a lot of time into. Awesome. Jakob Poeltl, technically on the team, but they traded him before he got his second contract, so doesn't technically count, but they're reaping the benefits of it still. They kind of like lent him to the Spurs for a while there, and he got a chance to develop, so there's more success in this than probably the table's giving them credit for. Siakam, big success for them. OG Anunoby, big success for them, right? Obviously, didn't hold on to him. Scotty Barnes, since then, been a big success, right? Didn't hold on to Banton. We'll see what they do with other guys. Grady Dick is looking promising early, right? A lot of young guys that they have on the team are getting a lot of burn right now. So Toronto, they might be sticking around this place, man. Toronto seems to be like overall a pretty quality team to be drafted by. Seems like they're pretty good at developing their guys and getting a lot of success out of them, because not a lot of these guys were just high draft picks either. So that's kind of interesting. All right, now we get into the big three here. First of all, the Miami Heat, who I think a lot of us would have presumed is there. They haven't actually drafted that many players within this time, not even 10 people over those 10 years, but all of these guys suited up for them at some point. I think that's pretty cool in and of itself. Justin Hamilton wasn't much of anything. James Ennis was a rotation player for them for a while, but they moved on. Shabazz Napier wasn't much. Justice Winslow, like, yeah, he got a second contract, wasn't that great. Richardson's good for them. Bam's good for them. Tyler's good for them. And then kind of some bleh after that. So while the Heat's success rate is better, are they really getting anything that notable, right? Like Hero and Bam, obviously as of late, that's a big part of the core of their team and stuff, but like, what does that say for like a Jaime Jaquez or something, right? And some of the other young guns that they got on this squad, like, are they really going to turn into something all that crazy? Or is there kind of like a talent cap with the Heat? I don't know. Obviously there's been some other successes that they've found like outside of the draft and stuff. This only includes drafted players, and we all know the things that they've done for guys like a Max Strus or like a Caleb Martin, right? Guys like that. I don't know. There's plenty more to name that have found success within the Heat. But in terms of draft itself, how good is it? Most of the time, it ends up somewhat working out for them, and they're turned into somewhat of an asset, right? Like Precious just got traded early, and they got some assets for it, but I don't know. I find that kind of interesting that like there's not a higher quality of like drafted player on here. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Moving on to the Hawks. A surprise team to find here, right? But some of these guys maybe not quite as fun as maybe you'd think. Like Mike Scott, he was interesting for a while. Schroeder was a really good pick for them. But then you had like Muscala, Adrian Payne, right? Walter Tavares didn't turn into anything. Torian Prince, good draft pick by them. DeAndre Bembry kind of fell out of the league. John Collins, good pick by them. Trae Young obviously achieved a lot. Kevin Huerter actually got his second contract and then like got moved pretty early on into it, but still counts for them. DeAndre Hunter, nice draft pick. Cam Reddish, not bad, just traded him early. Same with Fernando. Okongwu's been good for them. Johnson's been good for them. So overall, they've been pretty solid at keeping people since Dennis Schroeder. Like, it was kind of gross here. None of these guys were like elite draft picks by any means anyway. And this team has a lot of constant success, maybe not in the last couple of years, but in this time frame, they were pretty solid. So that's interesting that they were like consistently a good playoff team and they were drafting talent that was ending up being pretty good. So shout out the Atlanta Hawks. But the number one team with players that actually got a chance is the San Antonio Spurs right here. And it's really not all that crazy. And I think that that's something that I want us to take away from this, is how likely it is that someone actually becomes an all-star or actually becomes a guy that gets a second contract or makes all NBA. Again, we get so excited come draft time every year because like the opportunities are endless. It's important to keep the perspective that only 23% of the time you even get a second contract with that team, right? How many of these times were like all-star players traded? It happened, but it wasn't a crazy amount. So something to keep perspective of. Not a lot going on here. Kyle Anderson was interesting for them. DeJounte Murray and Derek White, a couple good picks back to back. Lonnie Walker they didn't hold on to. Keldon Johnson's pretty so far. Vassell and Trey Jones working out early for them, but even then, it's not the prettiest list, and that's the number one team with keeping like guys on their second deal. Obviously, a lot of these guys didn't even play in a regular season game. Like, look right here. There was a while there where they're drafting all these people that never saw the light of day. So that's why the Spurs, when you look at it here, they drop pretty considerably down to 30, still a good percentage, but 31% of the time when we actually look at the pick. So they shoot up a ton when you do that. They draft a lot of people that they don't end up doing anything with. So kind of interesting here. If I had to pick a team that's just the best at developing talent or something like that, right? Who would we actually say? I feel like the Magic might be one of them, right? The Magic look like it. Maybe the Hawks, probably another one. Like, obviously the Heat, their percentage is really interesting in the fact that they're like keeping all those guys on the roster, right? The Grizzlies, probably another team that I find interesting, if anything, just for this run here. If they would have had any success up here, they would have been much more towards the top. But I don't know. I think that this was interesting. I hope you guys found this interesting. I know this wasn't like the most colorful thing. This is a lot of talking, more of a podcasty type feel, I guess. But I don't know. I thought it was an interesting thing to do, and I'm very curious, now that you have this information, one, how would you improve the study? That's what I'm always curious about, to hear how could we have made this better? Should I go further back in time and get more data and like report back on something? I don't know. You guys let me know. But also, like, what does this tell you about your favorite team? Like, is your team good at developing talent? Because let's be honest, if you're one of these teams towards the bottom, like if you're the Sacramento Kings, how much can you really say about that? I mean, things are maybe looking up right now, but you know what? That's what the Lakers probably said at one point or two, right? Like, take a look at the Lakers here. There was a lot of big talent coming in, but until they get that second deal, what does it really tell you? How much they care about those young guys? So I don't know. Something to think about, but I want you guys to tell me now. Leave me a comment. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment. I respond to all of them, but hey, seriously, this was a fun study just for me to kind of throw together and make the little sheet for it and everything. But hey, appreciate you guys as always, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks so much. Bye.